Thank you all for the chance to come back. For the students here, mark my words, you're really going to appreciate returning to college when you're old and everyone looks incredibly young, and you realize you used to look the same way. So BU has been foundational for me in my life, and I'll tell you a bit of why. I'm actually an accidental engineer and an accidental BU person, and here's how that worked. I wanted to be a physician growing up, and if my number 2 sort of career selection was an aerospace engineer, and this was a little weird. I had the usual ham radios and all kinds of electronics around the house, and always taking things apart and sometimes putting them back together. And when I went around looking for pre-med programs to apply to, I applied to the 6-year med program at BU. And also at Duke, and didn't get into either, but I got a letter back from Dean Padullo saying, hey, have you ever thought of biomedical engineering? And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting, and the same kind of thing happened with Duke. At that time, biomed engineering was pretty bizarre and a rare sort of specialty, and I had 2 reasons to go with that. I thought, well, this would allow me to combine my interest in medicine and engineering, and more importantly, if I don't get into medical school, I could be employable, and that would be really vital. In my family, I was the first guy to go to college ever, and as with Jenny's family, my parents never came to Boston until I graduated. We couldn't afford that. My first ever ride on an airplane was to come here to school solo, and all kinds of weirdness like that. So I had no clue at all, and as to deciding between Duke and BU, I made a very sophisticated evaluation. I decided that Boston sounded more exciting than North Carolina. And so I came here, and some memorable things occurred while I was here. The first is that I met my wife, Nancy, who's here someplace, and she was a communications major, and we were RAs in Shelton Hall. She was on the 4th floor. I was on the 5th floor, the engineering floor, and to show you how messed up things were in those days, if you take a look at me, I was her disciplinarian. I was the enforcer she would turn to when she needed muscle to get people into line in school, so that was terrific. The most important, it would have been better off to have someone like Kit, I think, but
I was usually the one being disciplined.
The thing that really I've learned to appreciate from BU so much that stood me so well in my future academics and indeed work in life was that the focus here was very uniquely not on remembering things other people had figured out, which is most of the rest of my career in medical school and business school and all the year. Read this and remember it and regurgitate it, and I'm pretty good at that. As many of us here probably are, and I used to long for those sort of statements in medical school, such as, and the mechanism for this is not yet understood, which I loved because that meant they couldn't test me on it. At BU, the emphasis here in the engineering program was on solving problems, and that is just how you look at something impossible and figure out how to decompose it into manageable chunks and what's the most important thing and how do you address that first. And then if you can get through that, how you move on to the next thing to figure out whether there's a solution or not. And I remember what really boiled my brain in the exams was, of course, I knew how to do all the homework assignments, and I've gone over them, and now I'm going to get all these concepts applied in a unique way on the exam, which was not a question of doing the same problem again. I had to do something new under pressure, and that I hated at the time, but it actually served me in very good stead because in business and in life, you encounter the Societal Engineer Project in your community, things that look insoluble, and instead of throwing your arms up and saying, there's nothing I can do, you can at least figure, well, here's a first step. And so that was really helpful. In terms of my career, I went out to combine my interest in medicine a bit more on the entrepreneurial front and got an MBA at Stanford. And the notion in the late 80s was to try to do things to address the gap between, my phone is ringing and it's my ringtone yelling, I am outraged. That it's a little interesting. But the idea was to take the state of the art in engineering, which really hadn't caught up to medicine in those days. And so with a business partner in venture capital and other things, we did some cool technologies. We started a technology company that was aimed at treating tachyarrhythmias, rapid heart rhythms, via catheter instead of open heart surgery. That's known as radiofrequency catheter ablation. That technology was acquired by Medtronic, so I got to be a vice president at Medtronic when I could never have gotten to be one any other way except they had to buy my company. Then we started a women's healthcare company focusing on minimally invasive alternatives to abdominal hysterectomy. It seemed pretty primitive to still do that very common operation the same old way. So we came up with a number of solutions for that, took the company public, and Johnson & Johnson acquired that company in the late 90s. And then my business partner through the last quarter century and I violated all the rules about a decade ago. Instead of doing something incremental, we determined that what we ought to do is try to reinvent what a pharmaceutical product is, what a pill is. And that's Proteus Digital Health. The idea is to put the world's smallest medical device, smallest ingestible sensor in every single pill. Every chip has a unique ID code, and when you swallow it, your pill connects to the internet, so we know who takes what, how their body responds, and what to do next. Closed feedback loop, sound familiar? And like with Amit, taking a technology from some other area, we took something really simple, and this was middle school science fair projects where you make potato or lemon batteries. Two dissimilar metals in electrolytic contact form a current. So if you take a silicon chip, as we do, and you coat one side with a little bit of copper, the other side with a little bit of magnesium, both essential dietary minerals, sand is also part of your diet. You swallow one of these things, it generates a voltage, powers an oscillator, and then if we short the anode and cathode at a high frequency, we can convey information to a Band-Aid. We also have patients wear that's monitoring their physiology, their activity, bunch of other stuff. When you're in range of your phone, it talks via Bluetooth and on up to the internet. What we're trying to address are a couple of things. First of all, in the world right now, over half of all patients with chronic disease aren't benefiting from their drugs because they're not taking it right. And the traditional response is to say, if you wanted to get healthy, you would listen to me. It's an incomplete product. There is no information to really keep people in an understanding position. And then if you look at public health threats around the world, HIV, tuberculosis, and all the rest, there is a very poor ability to track medication usage and have people get well and be fully treated. So that's what we're doing at Proteus. None of it would be possible without BU, so it's terrific to be able to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, George.